September 16th, 1981. Tremendous build-up for Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hitman Hearns for the undisputed welterweight championship in Las Vegas. We have talked about this fight before, but it is worthwhile to bring it up again as part of the Four Kings. And this time frame, they finally fought. They finally met after a couple of years of everybody wondering, are they going to fight? They did. And Sugar Ray Leonard, with a dramatic rally late in the 15-round fight, gets a stoppage that he needed. As it turned out,
Yep,
Dan Rafael was losing on the cards.
he wasn't. I mean, this is about as big as a fight as there is in the history of boxing. The anticipation, the massive media coverage. I mean, this was front page news across the country. You know, newscast type leadoff stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Mainstream media all over this thing. They had been building towards this fight for a while. They had been on national television calling each other out, or their teams looking for the fight, the fans looking for the fight, the boxing industry looking for the fight. They were young. You know, they weren't waiting till they're, you know, this is not Spence Crawford where they were, you know, near the end of their careers, basically in their mid 30s to late 30s doing the fight. Tommy was like, I want to say 25, 26, and Ray was like 23. I mean, they were young fighters with long futures in front of them.
And another important factor, as you just alluded to, boxing much more mainstream in the coverage, and they were repeatedly fighting on network TV, not on pay-per-view, to build
TJ, more
this up.
importantly, they were active. I mean,
yes, active and constantly fighting on free TV to build up this closed circuit fight. There was no pay-per-view to build up the interest in the closed circuit fight. There's no doubt.
So it was 3 months before the fight. Now, when you do a mega fight now, the notion that the two guys who are fighting each other, imagine Canelo and Golovkin, we just talked about, 3 months before the long-awaited fight, they fight on the same card against other opponents. That would not happen. Tommy took on a nobody, a terrible opponent in Pablo Baez, but Ray went up and went up one weight class and won the junior middleweight title against Kalule on a card that took place in June, and they were scheduled to meet not even the full 3 months later in the biggest mega fight. I mean, a couple things of note about that fight, by the way. Main Events, the promotion company, which became one of the biggest, most significant promoters in boxing for most of the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and it's only been maybe the last 10 years or so that they've petered out to some degree. But they became a powerhouse. I mean, they promoted tons of big names, Evander Holyfield, and many top guys, Meldrick Taylor, and all those Olympians from 1984. And obviously, they promoted Fernando Vargas and Arturo Gatti. I mean, on and on and on, just a million champions. This was their first big event. This was their first major fight that they promoted. And again, in the pantheon of the Four Kings fights, this is about as big of a fight as there was. I mean, I think in terms of media and fan attention, it's probably bigger than the first Duran Leonard fight, which is what kicked off the Four Kings rivalry. As it turned out, maybe you could argue finally near the end when Leonard and Hagler finally met for the middleweight title, it may be considered a little bigger commercially and mainstream wise than this fight, because they had spent so many years, Hagler and Leonard, established themselves in the mainstream, right, even more so than what was going on.
And they had both beaten the other two at that point.
But I mean, look, it's a great fight. It was a tale of two fights because Tommy, Ray was I won't say the big favorite, but he was the favorite to win the fight. I actually saw this in one of the media polls that they had done where they asked for the picks. They had pulled something close to 50 writers, and it was almost 40 of them were picking Ray to win the fight. So, I mean, he was a substantial favorite from that standpoint. And it was turned out that Tommy Hearns was the one that was winning. And you mentioned that Ray needed the knockout. And of course, there's the very famous scene between rounds 12 and rounds 13, where you got the great Angelo Dundee in Sugar Ray Leonard's corner. Simply, and Angelo, if you knew him as a cornerman, he spoke softly and carried the big stick, as they say. He didn't really say a whole lot of stuff. So when he spoke, you listen. And when he told, this was his, I call it his love language, his coded words. This was, you better go out there and fucking take care of business. But he didn't say it like that. He said, "You're blowing it, son. Now you're blowing it.
You got 9 minutes left. You're blowing it, son. You're blowing it. You're about to lose again."
That was enough for Sugar Ray Leonard to know the deal there. But listen, at the end of the day, fights just don't get much better than this. This is everything that we love in boxing. Two great fighters who would go on to have all kinds of other glory besides this match, evenly matched, different kind of styles. Fans wanted this fight, and they delivered absolute fucking classic. This is one of my favorite fights. Not that long ago, when there was, I don't know what the anniversary was, but I did a piece in my Substack and my Fight Freaks Unite newsletter where I ranked all 9 of the Four Kings fights. This one is very high up on that list. It's not number one, but it's certainly way up there. And it only took them 8 years to have the rematch, unfortunately, which was another heck of a fight too, by the way. But this, when you talk about like the all-time HBO fights, for example, they did over 1,000 fights on HBO in their history of televising boxing. This was not live on HBO, but they had the rights to the replay, which they bought and had their, and so it counts as an HBO fight because it aired on the network, even it was on a slight delay there by a couple of weeks or a week or two. This is one of the biggest fights they ever showed in their entire history of doing fights, and we know the legendary fights that HBO showed. And this is really what kicked it off. So HBO had done huge amounts of fights through its time in boxing, and they had done a lot of fights in the 1970s. But the fight that really I feel like kickstarted them into put them really into another level was when they ended up doing this fight and then picked up what they did beyond that. Anyway, just one of the all-time great fights.
I have told this story before, and I'll just tell it briefly here. I'm a young TJ. At this point, I am 11 years old. We're living in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My father was in the church ministry. We were at a church in Tennessee where we lived for about 4 or 5 years. There was a huge boxing fan that was a member of the church that had a connection with this guy that could only be described as a millionaire. I remember as a little kid, we're at this mansion, at this house. This was a weeknight, Dan Rafael, that they're having this fight, as they would commonly do. You've explained that before.
I think it was a Monday. It was like a Monday or Tuesday.
Closed circuit, right? Closed circuit fight. And he had one of the massive satellite dishes, the ones that are the size of a swimming pool back in the day. They're that big out in the front yard, not the little direct TV dish that they don't even have anymore. So we're watching the whole undercard, and I got to stay up that night because I had done my homework. I had taken my nap, and I got to stay up and be there that night. And right as they got in the ring and got ready to fight, the scramble button got hit for everybody that was pulling this down. In the early days of pirating a satellite feed, not an online stream, they scrambled it for everybody. We watched the fight, listening to the audio through the squiggly lines.
PJ, one thing you can count on,
it's crazy,
is if there's a technology, people will try to steal it.
Of course.
Signal. So, and by the way, I looked this up through 13 rounds because Ray stopped him in the 14th round. Tommy Hearns was ahead on all 3 cards: 125, 121, 125, 122. 124, 122. That's how they did it back then when it was 15 rounds, kids, not 12 rounds.
Yes. And so, again, we sat there for the 45 minutes of drama, and they were trying everything to switch the satellite in the front yard, which it took some time. Again, bear in mind, folks, no internet. This is pre-cell phones. This is primitive closed circuit. And there you go. That's what I remember about that. And I did not get to clearly see the fight, not through the squiggly lines, until the HBO replay.
So another thing about this fight is that very rarely you have this type of fight that's so anticipated that it actually lives up to the hype. But this did, and lots of people picked this fight as the 1981 fight of the year. If you go look, these lists are done all the time, but in like the mid 90s, when Ring Magazine, they rank their top 100 fights of all time or something like that. They ranked this the 9th greatest fight of all time. If you can crack the top 10, and when you think about all the boxing events that have taken place, that's pretty freaking good.
One other factor too, Hearns had been destroying everybody with that lethal right hand, and he could not knock Ray Leonard out. As for whatever you want to say about Ray Leonard, he couldn't drop him, couldn't knock him out, and in the end, Leonard overcame him. Some questioned whether the referee, who was a very good referee at that time, Davey Pearl, stopped the fight too soon.
I don't agree with that at all.
With Hearns hurt on the ropes, Hearns winning the fight, which Davey Pearl wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have known what the scores were.
This fight was stopped just fine. And by the way, you talk about how Tommy couldn't knock Ray down. When they met in the rematch 8 years later, he put him on the deck twice and still only got a draw.
Indeed. So there you go. Nostalgia on Leonard. Hearns won.
I'll be posting my memorabilia on my Twitter on the day of the anniversary.
Incredible build up to that fight.
I'll go back and I'll watch the HBO Legendary Night special on YouTube. Fantastic stuff. I'll watch the fight.
Got to do that.
All right. You know what I'm going to do actually? Now that, because I know we were going to discuss this on the show, when I go to bed tonight, and this is the true story, the one boxing book I keep on my bedside, it's in my nightstand, is my copy of The Four Kings by my dear departed friend George Kimball. And I will, when I lay my head down on my pillow before I actually go to sleep, I will start to read the chapter on Leonard Hearns 1.
Good luck hanging in there to read all of that, but yes, well worth it on Leonard and Hearns and the nostalgia.